Welcome to episode 42 of ECTEL Bites. The show is a production of the Eastern Caribbean Telecommunications Authority, and I'm your host, Caretta Crooks-Charles, ECTEL's Communications and Media Relations Manager. Thank you so much for joining us. Over the past few episodes, we've explored how digital inclusion is unfolding across the Eastern Caribbean, looking at who has access to digital technologies, how people use them, and where gaps still remain. These conversations are grounded in data from the Digital Inclusion Survey conducted by ECTEL in partnership with the OECS Commission under the World Bank-funded Caribbean Digital Transformation Project, or the CARDIT. The survey gathered insights from households and individuals across ECTEL's 5 member states. They are the Commonwealth of Dominica, Grenada, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. In this final episode of the series, we turn our attention to St. Vincent and the Grenadines, examining what the survey reveals about digital access, affordability, usage, and skills, and what these findings mean for strengthening inclusion and resilience going forward. Joining us once again is Mrs. Ferdil Felix Polius, the regulatory analyst in ECTEL's Economics and Finance Department, who will guide us through the results for St. Vincent and the Grenadines and help place them in a regional context. Welcome back to ECTEL Bites, Ferdil.
Thank you, Caretta. It's good to be back.
All right, so we have quite a bit to discuss. We're going to jump right into it. So as we close this series, why is digital inclusion such a critical issue for ECTEL and its member states, particularly for small island developing states like St. Vincent and the Grenadines?
Thanks again, Caretta. Digital inclusion is critical because it ensures that everyone can participate in the digital economy and access essential services. For small island states, connectivity is not just about communication. It supports economic growth, education, healthcare, government services, business, and even disaster resilience. When persons have affordable broadband and the skills to use it, it ensures that they can access online learning, work remotely, run businesses, as well as to engage in digital services. From a regulatory perspective, digital inclusion ensures that connectivity is available, accessible, and affordable to everyone, including rural communities and vulnerable groups.
Okay, thanks, Ferdil. So focusing now on St. Vincent and the Grenadines, who participated in the survey? What can you tell us about the sample size and the key demographics reflected in the data?
Thank you, Caretta. To ensure a statistically representative sample, we collected data from 745 households and 1,978 individuals across St. Vincent as well as the Grenadines. Looking at some of the key demographic highlights, at the household level, we noted that about 55.5% of the households surveyed were urban and 44.5% rural. Most households had 3 to 5 members, that's 53.7% of households, and nearly half had no children under 15, that is 45.1%. At the individual level, we noted that 51.5% were male, while 48.5% were female. The largest group of respondents was over 50, that is 30.4%. And we also observed that around 61.3% were employed, while 19.5% were unemployed. Less than 5% of respondents reported having a disability. We're quite pleased to observe that the survey had a strong response rate of 97.9%.
Okay, thanks, Ferdil. And again, I'm seeing some similar trends where nearly half had no children under 15.
Yes.
I think this is the constant
Yes.
from all.
That was quite prevalent across the member states.
Yes. Okay. All right. So how was the survey structured and what were the main areas of focus?
So as we would have discussed when we last met last week, The survey was a two-part survey, and it focused mainly on how households and individuals access ICT devices, services, as well as broadband services. It also focused on how these services and devices were used. But in addition to that, we also looked at other ICT indicators, including affordability, quality of service, and quality of user experience, digital skills and engagement, as well as digital security. So overall, the survey highlighted progress, challenges, and where targeted interventions are needed.
Okay. What are the most important household level findings for St. Vincent and the Grenadines?
Okay, so we will start to look at connectivity, and we'll delve first of all into device connectivity. So in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, that's overall, we noted that radio ownership declined significantly from 86.2% in 2014 to 52.8% in 2024. This is quite interesting because this is the largest decline in radio ownership across the member states. The only other member state that came close to this level of decline is Grenada.
But if I'm remembering though, Ferdil, radio ownership declined overall in
Yes,
all of them.
yes, but when you look at just the quantum,
the largest
yes,
is in St. Vincent.
St. Vincent,
okay.
followed by Grenada.
Okay.
So we also saw that TV ownership fell to 78.2% from 87.9% in 2014. So at 78.2%, this is the lowest ownership rate across the member states. And so at the same time, still focusing on TV, when you look at what TV services households were subscribing to, we noted that more than 50% of households subscribed to a multi-channel service. That was led by IPTV at 56%, and followed by cable TV at 27.6%. For those who did not have a multi-channel service, many reported using streaming services like Fire Stick, Roku, other devices. That was at 46.0%, and others 28.9% also reported using paid OTT services to watch TV. We also saw fixed telephone subscription dropped from 34.3% in 2014 to 18.6% in 2024. And that is also consistent with the decline that we have observed in all the other member states when it comes to fixed telephone subscriptions. But interestingly, again, 90.5% of households still own at least one mobile phone. And in the case of St. Vincent, the number remained almost unchanged. So when we did the survey in 2014, the households had already reported owning 90.5% had already reported owning at least one mobile phone. So that is really not a significant, we don't see a change here from 2014. Interestingly, about 34.4% of households rely only on mobile phones and have no other ICT devices. For households with these devices, however, tablets were the most popular at 51.8%, followed by laptops at 42.4%. And as we had observed in some of the other member states, including St. Lucia, we noted that households with children under 15 were more likely to own a tablet at 64.4%. And similarly, we also observed that 48.6% of households with children under 15 were likely to own a laptop, compared to only 35.0% without children. So here again, we see some similarities in terms of or the device ownership across the member states. But overall, what we are also observing is we have seen a shift away from your traditional media like radio, television. So this is the case in St. Vincent, and I think it was also the case in most of the other member states.
Okay.
Moving on, looking at some of the other barriers, some of the individuals felt that they had no need for broadband access, as 23%, sorry. And other individuals reported facing infrastructure issues such as lack of electricity. So we see that lack of electricity was a barrier or is a barrier to connection at 15%. We noted that it was also an issue in Grenada. 18% reported lack of infrastructure, electricity as a barrier to broadband access. What was even more interesting for us was that only 3% considered the cost of service or the cost of device a barrier. On the other hand, 45.2% said they would subscribe to the service if it were made more affordable. Okay. And as we discussed when we had a discussion on St. Lucia, 26.8% said nothing. We would persuade them to get a broadband connection. So as we discussed, again, I think this is clearly an area where an intervention is required. Looking at affordability and spending, as with the other member states, affordability of services remain a concern. While in the case of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, only 3% of unconnected households cite cost as a barrier. We noted that 45.2% said they would adopt a broadband service if it were made more affordable. So on average, households reported spending $137, EC dollars that is, on fixed broadband. Mobile prepaid, the spend on that service was on average EC $81. So we noted that for these two services, St. Vincent actually fell at the midpoint. So they were not at the highest, nor were they at the lowest. But on postpaid mobile, we noted that the average spend was $67 EC dollars, and that was the lowest spend across the member states. So generally, what we observe is that the perceptions of affordability was low in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. About 43% found mobile broadband affordable, around 55% found mobile voice affordable, and 51.7% found fixed broadband affordable. But despite this, we also observed that households with children under 15 were more likely to receive fixed broadband as affordable. I think that too is a common thread.
Yes,
yes,
it's
the member states.
Okay. So let's go over to quality of service and quality of customer experience.
Yes. So when it comes to choosing a broadband service, from the results, we noted that households mainly looked at cost, 26.8%, reliability, 24.5%, as well as equipment cost, 10.4%. This was slightly, as you noted, as you would have noted, this is slightly different in St. Vincent, where the third factor for the other member states was typically the maximum download speed.
Yeah.
In the case of St. Vincent, it's actually the equipment cost.
Okay.
So the most common issue was slow browsing, as reported by about 50% of households. That too, I think that was the most common issue across all the other member states. In St. Vincent and the Grenadines, there were also other issues reported, including no network access, no broadband service, depletion of credit, and speed tests being lower than what is advertised.
Okay.
So these were the common issues reported by households in St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
Okay.
On complaint resolution and satisfaction, we noted that a small percentage of households reported issues, and that was 13.4% for fixed broadband and 6.2% for mobile broadband. At the same time, we noted that satisfaction with complaint resolution was slightly higher for mobile broadband complaints. That was at 55.5% relative to fixed broadband at 51.1%. And when it came to escalation to the NTRCs, we noted that 11.9% of fixed broadband complaints were escalated to the NTRC, while 28.7% mobile broadband complaints were escalated to the NTRC. And very importantly, over 90% of households reported satisfaction with NTRC complaint resolutions. So that is something positive.
Indeed, and
something
congratulations.
Yes,
indeed. Grenadines for accomplishing such a high percentage on that. Okay, thanks, Ferdil. So turning to the individual component of the survey, what did the results reveal, particularly in terms of access, usage patterns and trends, affordability, and levels of digital skills?
Okay, so as we did for the household, so we'll start off by looking at ICT access and usage, and mainly device ownership and access. So from the results, we saw that about 72.4% of individuals own a mobile phone, which is actually the lowest among the contracting.
I was going to ask about that because that figure seemed pretty low compared to the other.
It is. So on average, for the other member states, over 80% of individuals own the mobile phone, but in the case of St. Vincent, it's just 72.4%. However, it is also worth noting that 97.8% of those devices are smartphones. So while you have a smaller percentage of individuals owning a mobile phone, most of these mobile phones were actually smartphones. So it means that a lot of these individuals had the capability of going on the internet using the smartphone.
Okay.
And here we saw gender parity in smartphone ownership, almost an equal number of males and females reported owning a smartphone. In addition to that, we saw that most people are actively using their mobile phones. So while only 72.4% of individuals own a phone, about 73.4% reported using one at least in the last 3 months. So looking at device use beyond mobile phones, we found that tablets are the most commonly used device at 47.5%, and we saw that usage is highest among younger persons. This is similar to all the other member states except in the Commonwealth of Dominica, where laptops were the most popular device. So apart from tablets, we saw that 26.5% of individuals were using laptops. And interestingly, we only saw that 9.7% were using desktops. This is consistent across the member states, except in the case of St. Kitts and Nevis, where 20.3% of respondents were still using desktops. Despite, this is very good information when you look at phone ownership use and device ownership, but we are still concerned that for the devices, 41.7% still reported not using any device regularly. And that concern is even more pronounced, given that we noted that a lot of the persons not using the devices are older individuals.
Right.
Despite a 6% decrease from 2014, we observed that prepaid mobile service remained the most subscribed mobile service in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, as the highest across the member states at 85.5%. Only 18.2% subscribe to a mobile postpaid mobile service, although this is an increase from 5.2% in 2014. So when you look at device-related activities and what individuals were actually engaging in, we noted that social networks was at 86.3%. That was only second to St. Lucia. When we last spoke, we noted that 93% of individuals in St. Lucia were using social networks. So continuing with St. Vincent, sending messages, that was being done by 67.5% of individuals. Again, that is a high. That is the highest across the member states. And we noted that purchasing goods and services online, that was only as an activity that was being undertaken by only 27.1% of individuals. We saw that 27.3% were using the devices for copying and pasting, and online banking was at 26.3%. Moving along to broadband internet use, we saw that 97.5% of individuals use a mobile phone to access the internet. That is compared to 50.8% in 2014. Of the approximately 2.5% who did not access the internet using a mobile phone, we noted that the main barrier was cost. That was 17%. Interestingly, in 2014, cost was also identified as a main barrier by 17.5%. So we see that not much has changed since 2014 in terms of cost being a barrier to mobile internet access. What is also worth noting, however, is that in 2014, 53.2% cited the preference for use of a laptop or personal computer as a barrier. So they just preferred to use, they did not want to use the mobile phone, they preferred to use their laptop or their personal computer. What is also worth noting is that in 2014, 53.2% of individuals cited the preference for use of a laptop or personal computer as a barrier. Surprisingly, this has declined dramatically to 1.4% in 2024. So when we look at the services that individuals were using to access mobile broadband in 2024, we noted that Wi-Fi was the most significant, was the top method at 89.3%. And this is a 16 percentage point increase from 2014. And this is also the largest increase across the member states. And here again, maybe we are seeing, given that if cost is a barrier for broadband access, the reliance on Wi-Fi may quite possibly be a means of managing costs. We also saw that apart from Wi-Fi, 20% of individuals said that they would use the data plan if Wi-Fi was not available.
Okay, so let's talk about the internet access and use now.
Okay. So we have seen a dramatic increase in internet usage since the last survey of 2014. So over 91% of individuals use the internet. That is an increase from 47.4% in 2014. And overall, this is a 43.7 percentage point increase. So this is only second to St. Lucia. We had observed the largest increase in St. Lucia at around 50 percentage points. But in the case of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the increase is quite substantial, but it is only second to St. Lucia. We noted that internet usage is higher among the employed and persons within the 15 to 50 age group. So persons within the 15 to 50 age group used the internet at an average of 96%, compared to only 79.5% for persons over the age of 50. So quite apart from the actual access, we wanted to find out where the access was happening. And what we found out was that most access was happening at home. 94.1% relative to 69% in 2014. There was a notable use of the internet at public facilities at 53.1%, at work 43.8%, and at other persons' homes 43.2%. Usage at schools and library was low, but as you would understand, higher among the youth. A significant number of individuals reported accessing the internet via mobile phones using Wi-Fi. That was at 43.2%. Tablets via wireless networks, 17.9%. Laptops via Wi-Fi at 14.2%. And use of desktops to access the internet was relatively lower at 12.4%. So here we see a very heavy reliance on Wi-Fi to use the internet, and likely as a means of managing costs. So in terms of the frequency of use, we noted that the majority of individuals who are accessing the internet daily, with usage range at approximately 94.5%. Not surprisingly, usage was higher, daily usage was higher among the 15 to 50 age group, that was at 96% compared to just 89% for persons over 50 years.
Okay. Thanks, Ferdil.
Despite the significant progress that has been made in internet access, we noted that 9% of respondents were still not using the internet. When asked, the main reasons cited were lack of need at 62.9%, and this was the largest percentage across the member states. Lack of knowledge was also identified as a barrier at 23.4%. So apart from internet access, we also wanted to find out what persons were using the internet for. And so when we look at some of the main activities that the individuals engaged in, we found that communication was at the highest, 94.1%, social media, 82.7%, messaging, and in the case of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, that was really seeking information on goods and services at 35.1%. Also in the case of St. Vincent, we noted that there was a keen interest in seeking health-related information online at 30.3%. However, while we noted that the use of the internet for communication, social media, messaging, etc., was pretty high, we saw that the use of the platform, online platforms, so online shopping, is still relatively low at 16.4%. This is actually the lowest across the member states. And internet banking is even lower at 10.3%. When we look at activities like online homework and school participation, while we noted that it was prevalent among the 15 to 25 age group, only 12.1% used the internet for homework, and 10.4% used it for school-related activities. Looking at participation in professional networks, it was even lower at 3.9%. And we also observed that only 7.4% used the internet to look for a job or to send out applications. So this is definitely an area where there needs to be some work.
Yes, for sure. Many areas, internet banking and
Yes.
yeah, wow.
So if you were to dig a little deeper, because we mentioned that online shopping was still relatively low at 16.4%. So if we were to look at this a lot more closely, we found that nearly 70% of individuals just did not shop online. And that was only the second highest to Grenada. When they did shop online, we found that most purchased clothing, footwear, sporting goods, and accessories at 26.2%. A few bought groceries online at 3.3%. And in terms of online payments, we also looked at what methods of payments were being used for online purchases, and we saw that 50.2% were using debit cards or bank transfers. 40.8% were using cash on delivery, which is a bit unusual, but this was what was reported by the individuals. And 29.0% used credit cards. And as we had observed in St. Lucia and in some of the other member states, the use of online payment services such as PayPal, mobile money accounts, etc., is still pretty low. And in the case of St. Vincent, it's at 4.8%.
Okay.
And
it may not be a very bad thing that there are only 70%, well, 70% of respondents do not shop online. It could mean that they're supporting their local economy too. But then if business owners there in St. Vincent, they need to be online.
Yes, yes. So we'll get to that because the next question we asked was, what are some of the reasons why you are not shopping online? And lack of interest. Here again, this is a common theme in St. Vincent. So in the case of non-participation in online shopping activities, 71.2% indicated that they just were not interested. And as you just mentioned, we see that 29.6% indicated a preference for in-person shopping. So I think some progress is being made in this area, but as you said, maybe there's some work to be done to ensure that more businesses are able to move online, their services online, so persons can maybe move their purchases online. Because as you see, a lot of people are still, quite a few are still interested in their online in-person shopping, but who knows, that may change. These services are moved online.
Right.
And just to cap it off, we noted that just a few, 3% cited lack of confidence issues. So they just did not have the confidence to shop online. And 4.1% cited security concerns. So they were not shopping online because they had concerns about the security of doing so.
Okay.
So quite apart from online shopping, we also looked at the use of over-the-top services as well as social media, recognizing that communication was one of the major activities that individuals participated in. For St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we noted that usage of OTT and social media was extremely high. WhatsApp, 98% of individuals were using WhatsApp. Facebook, 89.9%. YouTube, 87.9%. And Netflix, 53.4%.
So that means we should have quite a few persons from St. Vincent watching ECTEL Bites on these platforms, Facebook and YouTube, considering.
Definitely, we should see that. So we wanted to dig a little deeper to see what accounted for the high OTT and social media use. So when asked, individuals said that the top reasons for the use included affordability, 73.4%, ability to use the OTT services using Wi-Fi at 51.2%, and access to greater content at 30.5%.
All right, so thanks for that, Ferdil. Let's go into ICT and digital skills now.
Yes. So for St. Vincent and the Grenadines, this is an area of concern. About 67.6% have basic skills. And a bit of good news, this is the highest among the member states. But when we looked at intermediate and advanced skills, we found that the levels were too low. So only 14.6% of individuals have intermediate skills, while just 1.7% have advanced skills. So this is another area that requires targeted intervention to ensure and to promote participation in the digital economy.
So were there any findings from St. Vincent and the Grenadines that really stood out to ECTEL?
Yes, so there were two things that stood out in particular. We saw in St. Vincent and the Grenadines that there was the lowest individual mobile ownership at 72.4%, but the highest smartphone share among mobile phone owners at 97.8%. We also saw that there was a very strong reliance on public internet facilities, which, as we spoke about, is an indication of investment in community infrastructure.
Okay. So how does St. Vincent and the Grenadines compare with the other ECTEL member states? Are there lessons or patterns that emerge when looking at the other member states together?
Okay, so when we look across the 5 member states, we see that access to broadband and smartphone is generally high. But we also observe some differences. For example, in technology mix, we saw that the Commonwealth of Dominica was leading with fiber to the home connections. We saw that affordability perceptions were higher in St. Kitts, but a lot weaker in Dominica, as well as in St. Lucia. And we saw some differences in usage patterns as well. So there was a higher reliance on Wi-Fi in Grenada and St. Lucia. Notwithstanding these differences, there are some major cross-cutting gaps that are similar when you look at affordability of broadband and shortage of intermediate and advanced skills. So as we have discussed over the series, the shortage, both the affordability and the shortage of the advanced and intermediate skills constrain meaningful connection, despite the strong coverage and high adoption that we have observed.
Okay, thanks for that, Ferdil. So as we get ready to wrap up, who stands to benefit the most from the results of this survey, and how can different stakeholders, whether it's government, service providers, developers, or the communities, really use this information?
The data is useful for everyone, but there are specific stakeholders where I believe that the data would be even more beneficial. So when you look at government and policymakers, I think they can use the data to better target interventions, especially those that address the digitally vulnerable. Even service providers can use the data to design products that respond to the affordability constraints that we've identified in the survey, as well as to improve the reliability and the customer support based on some of the concerns that have been highlighted by respondents relating to quality of service and quality of user experience. So governments, regional partners, educators, community groups can also use the data to focus digital skills where the gaps are greatest. And we know that it is not in the basic use. We see some progress being made in terms of basic digital skills, but there is some work to be done, as we have indicated, at the intermediate and advanced levels. So these stakeholders can use that information to better target skills training. And when you look at even ECTEL, the NTRCs as regulators, quite apart from continuing with our data collection and monitoring and trying to guide policy and interventions in our member states, we can use more directly, we can use the data to, particularly the affordability and quality of service data to guide consumer protection, quality of service monitoring, and as we like to say, more evidence-based regulation. So I think there's something in it for everybody, but I think fundamentally, the group that stands to benefit the most is the consumers, because if everything is done right, if we use the data to address the gaps and to provide the interventions that are necessary, I think the consumers will benefit from better qualities and affordable services.
I agree with you, Ferdil, and they can use this information too to advocate for themselves because it's there. They're not making the figures up. This is,
definitely.
actual information gathered. So you are correct. I agree with you. Thank you so much, Ferdil, for being our guest on episode 42 of ECTEL Bites. It was a pleasure having you again.
It's good to be back. Thank you, Carita.
So remember, the entire DIS report can be accessed on our website. And as you heard from Ferdil, it gives a plethora of information about accessibility, affordability, quality of service, quality of experience, just quite a bit of information that would be useful to, as Ferdil mentioned, the consumers, governments, ECTEL, even the NTRCs. Just a lot of persons can benefit from the use of this information to really improve, what is delivered to the consumers at the end of the day. So just go to our website, www.ectel.int, to just do a further deep dive into the results from your member state. In case you joined us late, our guest was Mrs. Ferdil Felix Polius. She's a regulatory analyst in the Economics and Finance Department at ECTEL. And if you have any questions at all, please feel free to put them in the comment section and we'll be happy to reply. Apart from being on our Facebook page, this recording of ECTEL Bites will be on our YouTube channel, which is at ECTEL. It will also be on Instagram, LinkedIn, and X at ECTEL Authority, and on our website, which I just mentioned, www.ectel.int, and all the recordings from our previous shows, including this special series on the DIS, is also on our website. So please share it with someone who is not on social media. That's it for episode 42 of ECTEL Bites. Thanks again for watching, and I hope to see you again very soon virtually. I'm your host, Caretta Crooks-Charles, ECTEL's Communications and Media Relations Manager. Until next time, do take care and keep safe.